in that in his second advent there would be the end of what was all things as we've come to know it now, and that there would be a transition to an eternal age whereby the harvest, the promise of the separation of the wheat and the tares, and also judgment would be fulfilled, and that the wages of sin would be weighed out, and that justice would then prevail. And all of those that have harmed the innocent, the seed of Cain, those that have ruled on the thrones of the world, that have slaughtered the innocent, well, there would finally be repercussions for their actions, and that they would reap what they have sown. But I thought this evening I would start with a portion of the manuscript on the fall of man, and also then what led to um, the narrative of the Genesis account of the sons of God mating with the daughters of Cain, creating a race of giants, and how these entities became the adversaries of humanity in large part. So much so that the book of Enoch describes how, because the giants have no part in salvation and being a very unnatural being, that they, at the point of death, their spirits would go forth to wander as ravening beasts. And that esoterically, they would become shadow beings, ghosts, and apparitions, spiritual entities with no other way to amend their restlessness. And that it would continue this way until the end of days, when they were brought in judgment before the Most High God, as will all of the spirits, souls of humanity and the angels. Everybody would then be brought before the Messiah at the end of days. All right, let me first open the chat. And then we will begin our introspection of the Clementine Homilies. And for those that don't know, we did just make this collection available in print form. And so you can find them at sacredwordpublishing.com. It's quite extensive. All of the topics, all of the chapters, and the dialogue that occurs throughout these manuscripts, which bring to light a lot of detail, especially on the fallen angels, the rebel angels, uh, the giants, idol worship, the abomination that they were involved in, blood sacrifice, cannibalism, um, and how numerous of these fallen angels, the powers, the principalities, rulers of darkness, how they came to be the enemies of the Most High. All right. Cause of the fall of man. We'll start there. And you'll see as I read that these passages are not very long at all, but concise in their revelation. But they, because they had at first no experience of evils, being insensible to the gift of good things, were turned to ingratitude by abundance of food and luxuries, so that they even thought that there is no providence, since they had not by previous labor got good things as the reward of righteousness, inasmuch as no one of them had fallen into any suffering or disease or any other necessity, so that as is usual for men afflicted on account of wicked transgression, they should look about for the God who is able to heal them. But immediately after their despite, which proceeded from fearlessness and secure luxury, a certain just punishment met them as following from a certain arranged harmony, removing from them good things as having hurt them, and introducing evil things instead as advantageous. The metamorphosis of the angels. Few of the spirits who inhabit the heaven, the angels who dwell in the lowest region, being grieved at the ingratitude of men to God, asked that they might come into the life of men. They really becoming men by more intercourse, they might convict those who had acted ungratefully towards him, and might subject everyone to adequate punishment. When therefore their petition was granted, they metamorphosed themselves into every nature. For being of a more godlike substance, they are able easily to assume any form. So they became precious stones and goodly pearl and the most beauteous purple, choice gold, and all matter that is held in more esteem. And they fell into the hands of some, and into the bosom of others, and suffered themselves to be stolen by them. They also changed themselves into beasts and reptiles and fishes and birds, and whatsoever they please. These things also the poets among yourselves by reason of fearlessness, seeing as they befell anything, attributing to one the many and diverse doings of all. Chapter 13, the fall of the angels. But when having assumed these forms, they convicted as covetous those who stole them, and changed themselves into the nature of men, in order that living holily and showing the possibility of so living, they might subject the ungrateful to punishment, yet having become in all respects men, they also partook of human lust, and being brought under its subjection, they fell into cohabitation with women, and being involved with them and sunk in defilement and altogether emptied of their first power, were unable to turn back to the first purity of their proper nature. Their members turned away from their fiery substance, for the fire itself being extinguished by the weight of lust, changed into flesh. They trod the impious path downward, for they themselves, being fettered with the bonds of flesh, were constrained and strongly bound. Wherefore, they have no more been able to ascend into the heavens. Their discoveries. For after the intercourse, being asked to show what they were before, and being no longer able to do so, on account of their being unable to do anything else after their defilement, yet wishing to please their mistresses instead of themselves, they showed the bowels of the earth. I mean, the choice of metals, gold, brass, silver, iron, and the like, with all the most precious stones. And along with these charmed stones, they delivered the arts of the things pertaining to each, and imparted the discovery of magic, and taught astronomy and the powers of roots, and whatever was impossible to be found out by the human mind. Also, the melting of gold and silver and the like, and the various dyeing of garments, and all things, in short, which are for the adornment and delight of women, are the discoveries of these demons bound in the flesh. Chapter 15, the giants. But from their unhallowed intercourse, spurious men sprang much greater in stature than ordinary, men whom they afterwards called giants. Not those dragon-footed giants who waged war against God as those blasphemous myths of the Greeks do sing, but wild in manner and greater than men in size, inasmuch as they were sprung of angels, yet less than angels, as they were born of women. Therefore God, knowing that they were barbarized to brutality, and that the world was not sufficient to satisfy them, for it was created according to the proportion of men and human use, that they might not through want of food turn contrary to nature to the eating of animals, and yet seem to be blameless, as having ventured upon this through necessity. The Almighty God rained manna upon them, suited to their various tastes, and they enjoyed all that they would. But they, on account of their bastard nature, not being pleased with purity of food, longed only after the taste of blood, wherefore they first tasted flesh. Chapter 16 on cannibalism. And the men who were with them there for the first time were eager to do the like. Thus, although we are born neither good nor bad, we become one or the other. But when irrational animals fell short, these bastard men tasted also human flesh, for it was not a long step to the consumption of flesh like their own, having first tasted it in other forms. Chapter 17, the flood. But by the shedding of much blood, the pure air being defiled with impure vapor, and sickening those who breathe it, rendered them liable to disease, so that thenceforth men died prematurely. But the earth being by these means greatly defiled, these first teemed with poison, darting and deadly creatures. All things, therefore, going from bad to worse on account of these brutal demons, God wished to cast them away like an evil leaven, lest each generation from a wicked seed, being like to that before it, and equally impious, should empty the world to come of saved men. And for this purpose, having warned a certain righteous man with his 3 sons, together with their wives and their children, to save themselves. In an ark, he sent a deluge of water that all, being destroyed, the purified world might be handed over to him. When the purified world might be handed over to him who was saved in the ark, in order to a second beginning of life. And thus it came to pass. Chapter 18, the law of the survivors. Since therefore the souls of the deceased giants, who were greater than human souls, inasmuch as they excelled their bodies, they, as being a new race, were called also by a new name. And to those who survived in the world, a law was prescribed of God through an angel, how they should live, for being bastards in race of the fire of angels and the blood of women. For being bastards in race of the fire of angels and the blood of women, and therefore liable to desire a certain race of their own, they were anticipated by a certain righteous law. For a certain angel was sent to them by God, declaring to them his will, and saying, chapter 19, the law to the giants or demons. These things seem good to the all seeing God, that you lord it over no man, that you trouble no one, unless any one of his own accord subject himself to you, worshiping you, and sacrificing and pouring libations, and partaking of your table, or accomplishing anything else that they ought not, or shedding blood, or tasting dead flesh, or filling themselves with that which is torn of beasts, or that which is cut, or that which is strangled, or anything else that is unclean. But those who betake themselves to my law, you not only shall not touch, but shall also do honor to, and shall flee them. Their presence, for whatsoever shall please them, being just, respecting you, that you shall be constrained to suffer. But if any of those who worship me go astray, either committing adultery, or practicing magic, or living impurely, or doing anything other of the things which are not well pleasing to me, then they will have to suffer something at your hands, or those of others, according to my order. But upon them, when they repent, I judging of their repentance, whether it be worthy of pardon or not, shall give sentence. These things, therefore, ye ought to remember and to do, well knowing that not even your thoughts shall be able to be concealed from him. Chapter 20, Willing Captives. Having charged them to this effect, the angel departed. But you are still ignorant of this law, that every one who worships demons or sacrifices to them or partakes with them of their table shall become subject to them and receive and receive all punishment from them as being under wicked lords. And you who on account of ignorance of this law have been corrupted beside their altars and have been satiated with food offered to them, have come under their power, and do not know how you have been in every way injured in respect of your bodies. But you ought to know that the demons have no power over anyone, unless first he be their table companions, since not even their chief can do anything contrary to the law imposed upon them by God. Wherefore he has no power over anyone who does not worship him, but neither can anyone receive from them any of the things that he wishes, nor in anything be hurt by them, as you may learn from the following statement. The temptation of Christ. For once the king of the present time came to our king of righteousness, using no violence, for this was not in his power, but inducing and persuading, because the being persuaded lies in the power of everyone. Approaching him, therefore, as being king of things present, he said to the king of things future, all the kingdoms of the present world are subject to me. Also the gold and the silver and all the luxury of this world are under my power. Wherefore, fall down and worship me, and I will give you all these things. And this he said, knowing that after he worshipped him, he would have power also over him, and thus would rob him of. Sorry. I'll be right back, everyone. All right. Sorry about that. I had I was choking there for just a minute, but I'm gonna actually take one more sip. I'll be right back, everyone. All right. I think I'm better now. Let me find my place. Wherefore, fall down and worship me, and I will give you all these things. And this he said, knowing that after he worshipped him, he would have power also over him. And this would rob him of the future glory and kingdom. But he, knowing all things, not only did not worship him, but would not receive any of the things that were offered by him. For he pledged himself with those that are his, to the effect that it is not lawful henceforth even to touch the things that are given over to him. Therefore, he answered and said, you shall fear the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve. I'm only going to read a few more chapters in this particular line of discourses, and then I'm going to switch to um, some of the different passages. All right, chapter 22. However, the king of the impious, striving to bring over to his own counsel the king of the pious, and not being able, ceased his efforts, undertaking to persecute him for the remainder of his life. But you, being ignorant of the foreordained law, are under his power through evil deeds. Wherefore you are polluted in body and soul, and in the present life you are tyrannized over by sufferings and demons. But in that which is to come, you shall have your souls to be punished. And this, not you alone, suffer through ignorance, but also some of our nation, who by evil deeds, having been brought under the power of the prince of wickedness, like persons invited to a supper by a father celebrating the marriage of his son, have not obeyed, but instead of those who through preoccupation disobeyed the father celebrating the marriage of his son, has ordered us through the prophet of the truth to come into the parting of the ways, that is to you, and to invest you with the clean wedding garment, which is baptism, which is for the remission of the sins done by you, and to bring the good to the supper of God by repentance, although at the first they were left out of the banquet. The assembly dismissed. If therefore you wish to be the vesture of the divine spirit, hasten first to put off your base presumption, which is an unclean spirit and a foul garment, and this you cannot otherwise put off than by being first baptized in good works, and thus being pure in body and in soul, you shall enjoy the future eternal kingdom. Therefore, neither believe in idols, nor partake with them of the impure table, nor commit murder, nor adultery, nor hate those whom it is not right to hate, nor steal, nor set upon any evil deeds, since being deprived of the hope of future blessing in the present life, you shall be subjected to evil demons and terrible sufferings. And in the world to come, you shall be punished with eternal fire. Now then, what has been said is enough for today. For the rest, those of you who are afflicted with ailments remain for healing, and of the others, you who please go in peace. All right, this is the last chapter I'm going to read, and it's a little bit about healing. As far as this particular line of thought. And then I'll pick up in a different place. And it also speaks about how, sickness is caused by demonic influence and our involving ourselves in sin. And so that too is an interesting perspective. Chapter 24, the sick healed. When he had thus spoken, all of them remained, some in order to be healed and others to see those who obtained cures. But Peter, only laying his hands upon them and praying, healed them, so that those who were straightway cured were exceeding glad, and those who looked on exceedingly wondered, and blessed God and believed with a firm hope. And with those who had been healed, departed to their own homes, having received a charge to meet early on the following day. And when they had gone, Peter remained there with his associates and partook of food and refreshing himself with sleep. All right. All right. This is you guys heard me speaking about Zoroaster and a little bit about the idol worship and how they got into how the demons started to influence and to control and to take power over men. I'll read a few of these chapters and then I'm going to specifically after the break go into some of the information about the idol gods. Zoroaster. Of this family there was born in due time a certain one who took up with magical practice, by name Nebrod, who chose giant-like to devise things in opposition to God. Him the Greeks have called Zoroaster. He, after the deluge, being ambitious of sovereignty, and being a great magician by magical arts, compelled the world, guiding star of the wicked one who now rules, to the bestowal of the sovereignty as a gift from him. But he, being a prince, and having authority over him who compelled him, wrathfully poured out the fire of the kingdom, and he might both bring to allegiance and might punish him who at first constrained him. Therefore, the magician Nebrod, being destroyed by this lightning falling on earth from heaven, for this circumstance had his name changed to Zoroaster, on account of the living stream of the star being poured upon him. But the unintelligent amongst the men who then were, thinking that through the love of God his soul had been sent for by lightning, buried the remains of his body, and honored his burial place with the temple among the Persians, where the descent of the fire occurred, and worshipped him as a god. By this example, also others there bury those who die by lightning as beloved to God, and honor them with temples, and erect statues of the dead in their own forms. Thence, in like manner, the rulers in different places were emulous of like honor, and very many of them honor the tombs of those who were beloved of them, though not dying by lightning, with temples and statues and lit up altars, and order them to be adored as gods. And long after, by the lapse of time, they were through the posterity to be really gods. Thus, in this fashion, there ensued many partitions of the one original kingdom, the Persians first taking coals from the lightning which fell from heaven, preserved them by ordinary fuel, and honoring the heavenly fire as a god, were honored by the fire itself with the first kingdom as its first worshippers. After them, the Babylonians, stealing coals from the fire that was there and conveying it safely to their own home and worshiping it, they themselves also reigned in order. And the Egyptians, acting in like manner, and calling the fire in their own dialect, Phthahi, which is translated Hephaestus or Osiris, he who first reigned amongst them, is called by its name. Those also who reigned in different places, acting in this fashion, and making an image, and kindling altars in honor of fire, most of them were excluded from the kingdom. Chapter 7, Sacrificial Orgies. But they did not cease to worship images by reason of the evil intelligence of the magicians, who found excuses for them, which had power to constrain them to the foolish worship. For establishing this thing by magical ceremonies, they assigned them feasts from sacrifices, libations, flutes, and shouting, by means of which senseless men, being deceived and the kingdoms being taken from them, yet did not desist from the worship that they had taken up with. To such an extent do they prefer error on account of its pleasantness before truth. They also howl after their sacrificial surfeit, their soul from the death, as it were by dreams, forewarning them of the punishment that is to befall such deeds of theirs. Many forms of worship then having passed away in the world, we come bringing to you as good merchantmen the worship that has been handed down to us from our fathers and preserved, showing you, as it were, the seeds of plants, and placing them under your judgment and in your power. Choose that which seems good unto you. If therefore ye choose our wares, not only shall ye be able to escape demons and the sufferings which are inflicted by demons, but yourselves also putting them to flight and having them reduced to make supplication to you, shall forever enjoy future blessings. How the demons got power over men. Since, on the other hand, you are oppressed by strange sufferings, inflicted by demons on your removal from the body, you shall have your souls also punished forever, not indeed by God's inflicting vengeance, but because such is the judgment of evil deeds. For the demons, having power by means of the food given to them, are admitted into your bodies by your own hands, and lying hid there for a long time, they become blended with your souls. And through the carelessness of those who think not or even wish not to help themselves upon the dissolutions of their bodies, their souls being united to the demons are of necessity borne by it into whatever place it pleases. And what is most terrible of all, when at the end of all things the demon is first consigned to the purifying fire, the soul which is mixed with it under the necessity of being horribly punished, and the demon of being pleased. For the soul being made of light and not capable of bearing the heterogeneous flame of fire is tortured. But the demon being in the substance of his own kind is greatly pleased, becoming the strong chain of the soul that he has swallowed up. Well, we are at the break at the top of the hour, and so I might actually be able to get through this portion. How the demons are expelled. But the reason why the demons delight in entering into men's bodies is this: being spirits and having desires after meats and drinks and sexual pleasures, but not being able to partake of these by reason of their being spirits, and wanting organs fitted for their enjoyment, they enter into the bodies of men, in order that, getting organs to minister to them, they may obtain the things that they wish, whether it be, whether it be meat by means of men's teeth or sexual pleasure by means of men's members. Hence, in order to the putting of demons to flight, the most useful help is abstinence and fasting and suffering of affliction. For if they enter into men's bodies for the sake of sharing pleasures, it is manifest that they are put to flight by suffering. But inasmuch as some, being of a more malignant kind, remain by the body that is undergoing punishments, though they are punished with it, therefore it is needful to have recourse to God by prayers and petitions, refraining from every occasion of impurity, that the hand of God may touch him for his cure, as being pure and faithful. Uh, well, we still have 2 minutes. So I will read this. Unbelief, the demon's stronghold. But it is necessary in our prayers to acknowledge that we have had recourse to God and to bear witness not to the apathy, but to the slowness of the demon. For all things are done to the believer, nothing to the unbeliever. Therefore, the demons themselves, knowing the amount of faith of those of whom they take possession, measure their stay proportionately. Wherefore they stay permanently with the unbelieving, and tarry for a while with the weak in faith. But with those who thoroughly believe and who do good, they cannot remain even for a moment. For the soul, being turned by faith, as it were, into the nature of water, quenches the demon as a spark of fire. The labor, therefore, of everyone is to be solicitous about the putting to flight of his own demons. For being mixed up with men's souls, they suggest to everyone's mind desires after what things they please, in order that he may neglect his salvation. All right, we are at break. I will pick it up on the other side. We'll be right back.
As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com.
Little girl, we named her Eliana and started dreaming of what life would be like with her, where we would take her, what we would teach her, and of course, what we would read to her. One day we walked around a bookstore looking for books we might want for her and found nothing, so we started brainstorming what exactly we would want. Even from a young age, we wanted her to know and understand the heart of God, and hidden truths that are in ancient biblical manuscripts like the Book of Enoch, and the idea of the Prophecy for Children series was born. Justin got hard to work and praise Yah released the Prophecy for Children series. We are grateful for the support and amazing feedback from others who have been wanting the same for their children. We just found out we will be having a son, and we are excited to grow our family and to keep writing books for our children to share with our truth-seeking family. To order these books today, please check out the children's store at sacredwordpublishing.com.
Your partnership with Sacred Word Publishing goes further than the publishing of ancient manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed, Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
To become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.
Every day, questions arise.
Are the stories in the Bible true?
What if I told you that there are hundreds of confirming witnesses?
Which give intricate detail to the stories in the Bible.
Have you ever found yourself deep in the rabbit hole with questions that no one seemed to have the answers to? Check out swpcalendar.com to see when to join us next for our Ask Me Anything series with author and researcher Zen Garcia, as he sheds light on the mysteries which have us all searching together.
Hello friends, thank you for joining us this evening. I'm your host, Zen Garcia.
Denial is not a choice anymore. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the planet, not giving up. Revolution Radio. All right. Thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
All right. Welcome back, everybody, for a second hour. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen here on Revolution Radio. And for those that are just joining us in broadcast, I am reading through some of the Clementine Homilies, which come from the discourse of the Ante-Nicene Church Fathers. That is like a 10 to 12 book collection of manuscripts that preserves a lot of the extra biblical texts which were in deliberation at the time of the Council of Nicaea, and they were discussing the relevance of many of these texts because if you don't know, there was no authorized Bible at that time. There was no specific book that contained a number of manuscripts all put together where believers could find, all of them compiled and readily available to study in that manner. But there was just a wide array of manuscripts from all different portions of the world according to the witness of the apostles and to the people that interacted with the Messiah and the apostles as they went forth and doing the work of the Great Commission. And, a lot of those texts stood on their own and were passed down to different places, different churches, preserved by different peoples and cultures. And it wasn't until later that, there was an authorized Bible, and then everything else suddenly excluded and considered to be extra biblical. But anyways, this is some of that narrative. And this is the work preserved by Clement as he wandered and went forth with Peter. And it does cover a lot of discourses and a lot of really detailed focus on, especially the gods of those times, the fallen angels, and how they were not really gods, but they were accepted as such, and how this idolatry found origin. It's really, when you start to read all the material and all the information, there is so much, and it is certainly along the lines of, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but powers, principalities, rulers, darkness, and spiritual wickedness in high places. So, all right, let's continue. This is a short extract, and it's an explanation on Genesis 1:26, chapter 9, Genesis 1:26, appealed to by Simon. And we know that Simon the Magus, he often confronted, and he and Peter went head to toe many times over their travels. they kept encountering one another, and that Simon was trying to deceive and lead the lead the people astray, even wanted to buy the gift of the Holy Spirit. All right. And Simon said, "Since I see that ye frequently speak of the God who created you, learn from me how you are impious even to him. For there are evidently two who created, as the scripture says. And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. Now let us make implies two or more, certainly not one only." Chapter 12, Peter's explanation of the passage. And Peter answered, one is he who said to his wisdom, let us make a man. But his wisdom was that with which he himself always rejoiced, as with his own spirit. It is united as soul to God, but it is extended by him as hand, fashioning the universe. On this account also, one man was made, and from him went forth also the female. And being a unity generically, it is yet a duality. For by expansion and contraction, the unity is thought to be a duality. So that I act rightly in offering up what all the honor to one God, as to parents. And Simon said, what then? Even if the scriptures say that there are other gods, will you not accept the opinion? So now, my brothers, read for yourself in the books of piety. Rejoice greatly in the Holy Scriptures, full of salvation and light, and respond in a single voice, saying, the Holy Trinity is uncreated and exists from eternity. Before everything, it created every kind of being without number. Angels and archangels, cherubim and seraphim, the four living creatures with many eyes and powers and principalities. And so, as I've shared with so many of you and have taught for a very long time now, that the Holy Trinity is Elohim, and Elohim meaning plural, gods, is specific to the pre-existent Godhead, which is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, being the feminine aspect of the Godhead. And so this is what it is alluded to, that even in Genesis 1:26, the pre-Adamic humans, they were created in the image of the Godhead. Male and female created he them, which without a doubt implies that there is a feminine aspect of the Godhead, and that is wisdom, the Holy Spirit. All right, continuing. Christ, the only prophet, has appeared in different ages. But our Master did not prophesy after this fashion. But as I have already said, being a prophet by an inborn and ever-flowing Spirit, and knowing all things at all times, he confidently set forth plainly, as I said before, sufferings, places, appointed times, manners, limits. Accordingly, therefore, prophesying concerning the temple, he said, see ye these buildings? Verily I say to you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another, which shall not be taken away. And this generation shall not pass until the destruction begin. For they shall come and shall sit here, and shall besiege it, and shall slay your children here. And in like manner, he spoke in plain words the things that were straightway to happen, which we can now see with our eyes, in order that the accomplishment might be among those to whom the word was spoken. For the prophet of truth utters the word in order to the faith of his hearers. All right. I want to go ahead and skip. Let me read this portion. This is the one where it speaks about Christ being in different ages. And then I'm going to move on to some of the fallen angel gods, the Greek gods, as it's by name. But give heed to my first discourse of the truth. If anyone does not allow the man fashioned by the hands of God to have had the Holy Spirit of Christ, how is he not guilty of the greatest impiety in allowing another born of an impure stock to have it? But he would act most piously if he should not allow to another to have it, but should say that he alone has it, who has changed his forms and his names from the beginning of the world, and so reappeared again and again in the world, until coming upon his own times, and being anointed with mercy for the works of God, he shall enjoy rest forever. His honor it is to bear rule and lordship over all things in air, earth, and waters. But in addition to these, himself having made man, he had breath, the indescribable garment of the soul, that he might be able to be immortal. All right. All right, the wickedness of Jupiter. Actually, I'll start with the wickedness of the gods. Chapter 15. But I return to the foremost doctrine of the Greeks, that which states in stories that there are gods many, and subject to all kinds of passions, and not to spend much time upon things that are clear, referring to the impious deeds of every one of those who are called gods. I could not tell all their armors, amours, or loves, those of Zeus and Poseidon, of Pluto and Apollo, of Dionysus and Hercules, and of them all singly. And of these you are being instructed in the Grecian learning, that as competitors with the gods you might do like things. The wickedness of Jupiter, chapter 16. But I shall begin with the most royal Zeus, whose father Cronos, having, as you say, devoured his own children, and having shorn off the members of his father Uranus with a sickle of adamant, showed to those who are zealous for the mysteries of the gods an example of piety towards parents and of love towards children. And Jupiter himself bound his own father and imprisoned him in Tartarus until he also punishes the other gods. And for those who wish to do things not to be spoken of, he begot Matisse and devoured her. But Matisse was seed, for it is impossible to devour a child, and for an excuse to abusers of themselves with mankind, he carries away Ganymedes, and as a helper of adulterers in their adultery, he is often found as an adulterer. And to those who wish to commit incest with sisters, he sets the example in his intercourse with his sisters, Hera and Demeter, and the heavenly Aphrodite, whom some call Dodona, and to those who wish to commit incest with their daughters. It is a wicked example from his story in his committing incest with Persephone, but in myriads of instances he acted impiously, that by reason of his excessive wickedness, the fable of his being a god might be received by impious men. All right, next chapter. Chapter 17, their makers are like unto them. You will hold it reasonable for ignorant men to be moderately indignant at these fancies. But what must we say to the learned, some of whom, professing themselves to be grammarians and sophists, affirm that these acts are worthy of gods? For being themselves incontinent, they lay hold of this mythical pretext, and as imitators of the gods, they lay hold of this mythical pretext, and as imitators of the gods, they practice unseemly things with freedom. Which is true, if you believe that the gods are into adultery and incest and taking wives of all which they chose, without even the opinion of those whom they have selected to matter in the fate and destiny of these individuals. I mean, that's pretty hardcore. Second nature. On this account, they who live in the country sin much less than they do, not having been indoctrinated in those things in which they have been indoctrinated. Who dare do these things? Having learned from evil instruction to be impious. For they who from their childhood learn letters by means of such fables, while their soul is yet pliant, engraft the impious deeds of those who are called gods, and their own minds, whence when they are grown up, they ripen fruit like evil seeds cast into the soul And what is worst of all, the rooted impurities can easily be cut short. And what is worst of all, the rooted impurities cannot be easily cut down when they are perceived to be bitter by them when they have attained to manhood. For everyone is pleased to remain in those habits which he forms in childhood. And thus, since custom is not much less powerful than nature, they become difficult to be converted to those good things which were not sown in their souls from the beginning, where ignorance is bliss. Wherefore it behooves the young not to be satisfied with those corrupting lessons, and those who are in their prime should carefully avoid listening to the mythologies of the Greeks, for lessons about their gods are much worse than ignorance, as we have shown from the case of those dwelling in the country, who sin less through their not having been instructed by Greeks. Truly, such fables of theirs and spectacles and books ought to be shunned. And if it were possible, even their cities. For those who are full of evil learning, even with their breath infect, as with madness, those who associate with them, with their own passions, and what is worst, whoever is most instructed, whoever is most instructed among them is so much the more turned from the judgment which is according to nature. Let me check the chat room real quick. I appreciate all of you. I hope that you are enjoying the manuscript and that it is helping you to make sense of some of this stuff with regard to the pagan gods. I certainly believe it brought clarity to me, even though I had previous discernment. As to who they really were. All right, a little bit more, and then I'm going to go to some of the other Greek stories. And some of those amongst them who even profess to be philosophers assert that such sins are indifferent and say that those who are indignant at such practices are senseless, for they say that such things are not sins by nature, but have been prescribed by laws made by wise men in early times. Through their knowing that men, through the instability of their minds, being greatly agitated on these accounts, wage war with one another. For which reason wise men have made laws to prescribe such things as sin. But this is a ridiculous supposition, for how can they be other than sins, which are the cause of tumults and murders and every confusion? For do not shortcomings of life and many more evils proceed from adultery? Chapter 21, the evils of adultery. But why? It is said, if a man is ignorant of his wife's being an adulteress, is he not indignant, enraged, distracted? Why does he not make an adulteress? But why, it is said, if a man is ignorant of his wife's being an adulteress, is he not indignant, enraged, and distracted? Why does he not make war? Thus these things are not evil by nature, but the unreasonable opinion of men make them terrible. But I say that even if these dreadful things do not occur, it is usual for a woman, through association with an adulterer, either to forsake her husband, or if she continue to live with him, to plot against him, or to bestow upon the adulterer the goods procured by the labor of her husband, and having conceived by the adulterer while her husband is absent, to attempt the destruction of that which is in her womb through shame of conviction, and so to become a child murderer, or even while destroying it, to be destroyed along with it. But if while her husband is at home, she conceives by the adulterer and bears a child, the child, when he grows up, does not know his father and thinks that he is his father who is not. And thus he who is not the father at his death leaves his substances to the child of another. And how many other evils naturally spring from adultery? And the secret evils we do not know, for as the mad dog destroy all that he touches, infecting them with the unseen madness, so also the hidden evil of adultery, though it be not known, affects the cutting off of posterity. Chapter 22, a more excellent way. But let us pass over this now. But this we all know, that universally men are beyond measure enraged on account of it, that have been waged, that wars have been waged, and there have been overthrows of houses, and captures of cities, and myriads of other evils. On this account I betook myself to the holy God and the law of the Jews, putting my faith in the well assumed conclusion of the law. Well assured conclusion that the law had been assigned by the righteous judgment of God, and that the soul must at some time receive according to the desert of its deed. Indeed. All right. Oh, we're gonna pick up here the theory of magic. Chapter 5. Then Appian said, "Admit that I know more of these things than you do. However, that you may not think that there is nothing in what you have heard from me in reference to what you have said, I will tell you how the demons are under necessity to obey the magicians in the matters about which they are commanded. For as it is the magicians in the matters about which they are commanded, for as it is impossible for a soldier to contradict his general, and impossible for the generals themselves to disobey the king, for if anyone oppose those set over him, for if anyone oppose those set over him, he is altogether deserving of punishment. So it is impossible for the demons not to serve the angels, who are their generals, and when they are adjured by them, they yield trembling, well knowing that if they disobey, they shall be fully punished. But the angels also themselves, being adjured by the musicians in the name of their ruler, obeyed, lest being found guilty of disobedience, they be destroyed. For unless all things that are living and rational foresaw vengeance from the ruler, confusion would ensue. All revolving against one another. Scruples. Then said I, are those things correct then, which are spoken by poets and philosophers, that in Hades the souls of the wicked are judged and punished for their attempts, such as those of Ixion and Tantalus and Tiritus and Sisyphus and the daughters of Danaus, and as others have okay. I just heard a beep. And as many others as has been impious here. And how, if these things are not so, is it possible that magic can subsist? Then he, having told me that these things are so in Hades, I asked him, why are not we ourselves afraid of magic, being persuaded of the punishment in Hades for adultery? For I do not admit that it is a righteous thing to compel to adultery a woman who is unwilling, but if anyone will engage to persuade her, I am ready for that besides confessing my things. All right, let me skip. Jupiter is loved. All uncleanness with greediness. All right, I'll pick it up here. This goes into the behaviors of the gods. But let all doors be open to him, and let all baneful and arbitrary laws be set aside, which have been ordained by fanatical men who, under the power of senselessness and not willing to understand what is reasonable, and moreover suspecting those who are called adulterers, are with good reason mocked with arbitrary laws by Zeus himself through Minos and Rhadamanthus. For there is no restraining of Eros dwelling in our souls, for the passion of lovers is not voluntary. Therefore Zeus himself, the giver of these laws, approached myriads of women, and according to some wise men, he sometimes had intercourse with human beings as a benefactor for the production of children. But in the case of those to whom he knew that his being unknown would be a favor, he changed his form in order that he might neither grieve them nor seem to act in opposition to the laws given by himself. It becomes you, therefore, who are debaters of philosophy for the sake of a good life, to imitate those who are acknowledged to be the nobler, who have had sexual intercourse 10,000s of times. Jupiter's Amours, chapter 12. And not to spend the time to no purpose in giving more examples, I shall begin with mentioning some embraces of Zeus himself, the father of gods of men, for it is impossible to mention all on account of their multitude. Here, therefore, the amours of this great Jupiter, which he concealed by changing his form, on account of the fanaticism of senseless men. For in the first place, wishing to show to wise men that adultery is no sin, when he was going to marry, being according to the multitude knowingly an adulterer in his first marriage, but not being so in reality, by means, as I said, of a seeming sin be accomplished a sinless marriage. For he married his own sister, Hera, assuming the likeness of a cuckoo's wing. And of her were born Hebe and Ilithia, for he gave birth to Metis without copulation with anyone, as did also Hera to Vulcan. All right, we got just about 10 more minutes, so I'll read a little bit more about Zeus's amours. Then he committed incest with his sister, who was born Kronos, who was born of Kronos and Thalassa, after the dismemberment of Kronos, and of whom were born Eros and Cyprus, whom they call also Dodone. Then, in the likeness of Satyr, he had intercourse with Antiope, the daughter of Nicidius, of whom were born Amphion and Zethus. And he embraced Alcmene, the wife of Amphitryon, in the form of her husband, Amphitryon, of whom was born Hercules, and changed into an eagle, he approached Aegina, the daughter of Asclepius, of whom Aeacus was born. And in the form of a bear he lay with Amalthea, the daughter of Phocus. And in a golden shower he fell upon Danae, the daughter of Acrisius, of whom sprang Perseus. He became wild as a lion to Callista, the daughter of Lycaon, and begot Arcas the second. And with Europa, the daughter of Phoenix, he had intercourse by means of a bull, of whom sprang Minos, and Rhadamanthus, and Saprodon, and with Eurymedeusa, the daughter of Achilles, changing himself into an ant, of whom was born Myrmidon. With a nymph of Hersias, in the form of a vulture, from whom sprang the wise men of old in Sicily. He came to Juno, the earthborn, and rose, and of her were born Pergeus, Cronius, and Kittis. And he deflowered Osea, taking the likeness of her husband, Phoenix, of whom Antinous was born to him. Of Nemesis, the daughter of Theseus, who is also thought to be Leda, he begot Helena in the form of a swan, or a goose, and again in the form of a star. He then produced Castor, and Polydeuces with Lamnia. He was formed into a hopo. That's a lot. Okay, I'm going to skip a little bit more of as far as the love, the amours of Jupiter. And go to one more part. The gods were no gods. They were not gods then, but representations of tyrants. For a certain tomb is shown among the Caucasian mountains, not in heaven but in earth, as that of Kronos, a barbarous man and a devourer of children. Further, the tomb of the lascivious Zeus, so famed in story, who in like manner devoured his own daughter Metis, is to be seen in Crete, and those of Pluto and Poseidon in the Archerusian lake, and that of Helios in Astra, and of Selene, and of Hermes in Hermopolis, and Ares in Thrace, of Aphrodite in Cyprus, of Dionysus in Thebes, and of the rest in other places. At all events, the tombs are shorn of those that I have named, for they were men in respect of these things, wicked men, and magicians, for else they should not have become despots. I mean Zeus, renowned in story, and Dionysus, but that by changing their forms they prevailed over whom they pleased for whatever purpose designed. The origin of chaos. I'm going to read just a couple more, and then I'll end with final comment. I know this is, as far as the Greek histories and the behaviors of the gods and all the challenges of who was born of whom, it shows that, these stories they're real, but that they are connected to, the Genesis 6 story of the fallen angels and the giants. All right, so the origin of chaos. This matter of four kinds and endowed with life was an entire infinite abyss, so to speak, an eternal stream born about without order, and forming every now and then countless but ineffectual combinations, which therefore it dissolved again from want of order. Ripe indeed, but not able to be bound so as to generate a living creature. And once it chanced that this infinite sea, which was thus by its own nature driven, chanced that this infinite sea, which was thus by its own nature driven about with a natural motion, flowed in an orderly manner from the same to the same, like a whirlpool mixing the substances of such a way that from each there flowed down the middle of the universe, suitable for the generation of a living creature. This was carried down by all-carrying whirlpool, by the all-carrying whirlpool. See, that's the bottomless pit, the abysmal chasm, which the Greeks speak about, but they call it a sea monster when it's actually, just a physical anomaly within the sea called the navel of the oceans. The all-carrying whirlpool drew to itself surrounding spirit, and having been so conceived that it was very fertile, formed a separate substance. For just as the bubble is usually formed in water, so everything round about contributed to the conception of this ball-like globus. Then there came forth the light, after it had been conceived in itself, and was borne upwards by the divine spirit, which surrounded it, perhaps the greatest thing ever born, a piece of workmanship, so to speak, having life in it which had been conceived from that entire infinite abyss, in shape like an egg, and as swift as a bird. This is the last portion about Kronos and Rhea, which I believe is the beginning of the Greek gods. Now you must think of Kronos as time, Kronos, and Rhea as the flowing Rheon of the watering substance. For the whole body of matter was born about for some time before it brought forth, like an egg, sphere-like, all-embracing heaven, Uranus, which at first was full of productive marrow, so that it was able to produce out of itself elements and colors of all sorts, while from the one substance and the one color, it produced all kinds of forms. For as a peacock's egg seems to have only one color, while potentially it has in all the colors of the animal that is to be. So this living egg conceived out of infant matter when set in motion by the underlying and ever-flowing matter, produces many different forms. All right, I'm going to actually just stop there because that, kind of sounds like the story of the scientific Big Bang, huh? But it is interesting that they say all the origin of chaos and time and matter all came about from this whirlpool, which that is interesting. But let's go to the chat room again. But anyways, if you get this book and you read it, again, you will hear and understand a lot about the origins of the gods and how even the philosophers supporting the behaviors of the gods and the sin that they were involved in. I mean, it was straight up sin, the things that they were doing and engaging within. I think it will help you to better understand that time. Also, what happened and how, the hero worship and just like reading the book of Enoch and how it helps one to understand just the history of the pagans and how they ended up believing in and worshiping the fallen angels, how they accepted the rebels as their gods. And this is all relevant because we're going to see a repeat of this. As in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the second coming of the Son of Man. And that the fallen angels, the Antichrist, he's going to be one of these supernatural deities. And he's going to be showing signs and wonders. And he's going to tell people and remind them that, he created everything, even us. In the image, male, female created he them. They're going to take that and apply it not to the Holy Trinity, but to the fallen angels. And this is going to be the strong delusion that so many people are going to get on their knees and accept. They'll buy into it in a manner that they never could believe before. And so it's important that you learn the truth and not get caught up in the deception. That's why cosmology is so important, because it shows to you that these beings, the fallen angels, the Anunnaki, the fallen seraphim, angels that were cast down and cast out, they're not from somewhere out there, some far distant galaxy, but they are from right here, the interior of the earth, the abysmal chasm, the whirlpool, which creates the tides. And so it's important to understand these things, lest ye be deceived. And as it says, that the very elect could be deceived should it be possible. And I don't want any of you to get caught up in that way, deceived in that way. And certainly don't want you to bend your knee and accept the mark of the beast. I would just, I'd feel awful if you were to be led that astray. And so please, people, do some research and come to know that the ancient aliens theory is a great deception that is coming down the line. Be blessed all. Good night. Shalom.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this video and this broadcast. We appreciate all of you and thank you for your patronage. Please do like and subscribe and share with your friends. God bless all of you in your seeking.